All right, we'll call this meeting on September 25th, El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors meeting to order at 9:01 a.m. And may I have roll call, please?
Directors Osborne, Dwyer, Anzini, and Day present. Director Veerkamp absent. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, Clerk to the Board Sullivan present.
All right, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do I have a second to adopt the agenda?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the adoption of the agenda? We'll get to individual items as we go through it, but if there's any comment on the adoption of the agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to page 2 of today's agenda. Vice President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda, moved by Director Anzini and seconded by Director Dwyer. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, thank you. Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5 voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Jim, any employee recognition this morning?
Yes, good morning. The district received a letter from our customer Leah Snowden to express her appreciation for Devin Turman, construction and maintenance worker who recently worked on a repair to her home. Ms. Snowden wrote, "Please acknowledge Devin for his kindness he extended to me. He was nice enough to calm my fears of almost an 83-year-old lady." So I guess she was concerned about a little service line work there. Again, this just demonstrates a little kindness goes a long way for excellent service. So thank you, Devin.
Thank you.
That concludes.
That's wonderful. Is there any public comment on items not on today's agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. Vice President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak
Right, and
on.
I don't see anybody at the podium. We'll come back to you. Jim, on communications?
Nothing to report today.
Board? George?
Well, we had 2 days of 2 boats, 6 guys fishing at Caples. The fishing was great, the catching was lousy.
Yeah.
We caught 1 fish in 2 days. So I'm directing this to Dan.
Pat?
I'd just like to recognize Jose and Dan for and the team that put on the picnic. It was a great event, a good learning experience, I think, for everybody there. As in the raffle, they asked questions. You had to answer a question before you won the raffle prize. So also an educational event. Nicely done. Thank you very much.
I have no comments other than a request while I'm thinking about it to staff as we go through the cost of service process and are looking towards the 218 notice. If we could, the board, be provided with a draft of the 218 notice before it's printed and sent out, so we can review it, give feedback, and as I have gotten comments in the past from people that the previous ones were maybe not as transparent as they could have been, and so we just want to be as transparent as possible with what might happen with rates and that sort of thing. Thank you. Yes.
I think, speaking of transparency, I think, again, have to take hats off to the communications team for doing all of the outreach, and the education about the need for improving and repairing our infrastructure. So I think the transparency for those projects has been really well done in not only the waterfront, but on all kinds of media platforms. So, thanks.
Yep, thank you, I agree. All right, we will move to the approval of the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
So move.
Seconded.
All right, is there any public comment on items on today's consent calendar? Don't see anybody jumping up. Anybody online, Jennifer?
Vice President Day, it does not appear any members of the public are wishing to speak on the approval of today's consent calendar, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move to our information item number 4.
Surprise. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Elizabeth Leeper, Senior Deputy General Counsel for the district, and I will be presenting this informational item this morning regarding the district's efforts regarding the Caldor fire recovery. As we all remember, the Caldor fire started over 2 years ago, at which time the board declared an emergency, and we've been recovering ever since. And so today we wanted to provide an update both regarding the physical recovery of our damaged facilities as well as the financial recovery in terms of obtaining insurance proceeds as well as federal emergency funding. As the board is well aware, the Caldor fire caused extensive damage to district facilities, including critical flumes that convey a large majority of our water supply. The district took appropriate and immediate action to respond to that emergency, and correspondingly, there were significant costs incurred. And since then, district staff has been actively pursuing cost recovery efforts, both in terms of insurance as well as FEMA federal funding. We wanted to just provide one story of a damaged facility and the recovery of that damaged facility. So one of the damaged facilities was our wooden flume, Flume 30. So this is a before shot, and you can see both the wooden flume itself as well as the wooden trusses that support that flume. And next slide, thank you. As we know, wood does not respond well to fire, so this is Flume 30 after the Caldor fire. As you can see, very extensive damage to this facility. And here is the rebuilt facility in concrete. As the board is aware, where feasible, we convert these wooden flumes to a concrete U-shaped canal so that we can be fire resilient moving forward. So this particular facility is in much better shape for any future fire events. And so I wanted to provide some detail regarding both the insurance effort as well as the FEMA effort. We tracked 39 distinct areas of damage throughout the district's service area. Of those 39 events, 29 were associated with insured facilities. So this is through our property insurance. As you can imagine, we don't insure everything that was damaged. So for example, one of the tasks that is not covered by insurance is that we had to remove hazard trees that were near our insured facilities. So we insure the facility, but of course we don't insure the surrounding forest. So not all of the damaged areas are covered by insurance. But for those that are, we pursued insurance recovery. And then in addition, because several of the damaged facilities were our flumes that convey water for hydropower purposes, we did have significant lost hydropower generation revenue while we were rebuilding those flumes. So those are also covered under insurance as lost business income. So that is also part of the insurance recovery. Most of the damaged facilities associated with the insurance claim have since been rebuilt. So we're largely wrapping up the actual physical recovery associated with insurance, but the actual claim remains open as we continue to receive those funds. In addition, the district is seeking FEMA federal funding for all of the fire-related damages, so all 39 distinct areas of damage. The FEMA process can take several years, so that process is ongoing as well. And then let's talk the numbers. Before going into detail, I did want to recognize some of the staff that is basically spearheading this effort. So in particular, I wanted to recognize Jackie Noel, our risk analyst with the Office of General Counsel. Jackie is responsible for the insurance recovery effort, and as you can see from this table, so far Jackie has been able to recover over $22 million for the district through our insurer. So very significant effort, and I want to thank Jackie for her ongoing efforts with that. In addition, engineering staff is spearheading the FEMA recovery effort. So as you can see, we have started to receive FEMA funding for this incident, and we expect that recovery to be ongoing. In terms of the cost to the district, as you can see, very large numbers, so approaching $30 million in damages, as well as over $4 million in lost hydropower generation.
Elizabeth, do we have a ballpark on, and I know it could take years to get reimbursed by FEMA, but do we have a ballpark of how much that could be, or at least what we're shooting for?
Thank you for asking that question. So in terms of the maximum recovery available through FEMA, it's 75% of total costs. So that's kind of best case scenario. Often there are other issues that might arise with FEMA recovery in terms of, do you actually own the facilities or are you on Forest Service land? So there's sometimes issues with responsibility. Sometimes they also have issues with the conversion from flume to concrete and whether that's essentially an improvement. So at most, we would recover 75% essentially of what is not otherwise covered by insurance. But as you know, it does take years. We recently received a FEMA check for the 2017 storms, for example. So many years in the making. And so as you can see, there's still a balance of $11 million that we're going to continue to pursue. But of course, you know, even in the best of worlds, we're not going to get total recovery through either insurance or FEMA. I can go to the next slide. And so, as I mentioned, the insurance claim is ongoing. I do think we have received the bulk of those proceeds, but that claim remains open. We are trying to wrap it up, but there's a handful of small projects that we are completing before closing out that claim. And then, as I mentioned, I think the FEMA process will take several additional years to see the funding for that come through. I wanted to highlight, I know cost of service is all at the forefront of our minds, and so I think Caldor provides a very good recent example of just how important it is for us to maintain our large reserves when we have these large disaster events. Yes, we received insurance funding. That was a slow process. That's now we're at 2 years in the making, and we're still receiving those funds. So ultimately, it's the district that will have to have sufficient reserves to mobilize and respond to these disasters, and ultimately to minimize the disruption and impact to our customers and the essential services that we provide. This is an informational item only, so we simply wanted to update you regarding this recovery effort. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Lori, did you have anything?
No.
No? Okay. Don't see anything from the board. Pat, did you?
Quickly, I'd like to second the motion to have a significant reserve set aside. It's like a savings account that the family has to prepare for any kind of unexpected cost without having to max out your MasterCard. So I think it's important for us to have those financial reserves set aside.
Thank you.
All right, is there any public comment on information item number 4? No, I don't see anybody jumping up here. Nobody online, it looks like.
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 4.
All right, that was an information item. Thank you, Elizabeth. And now we'll move to information item number 5. Bless you. Seems familiar.
Familiar, really? It's like deja vu, right? Good morning, Board. I'm Jenny Downey, Customer Service Manager here with the district. I'm here today to present to you information item on the feasibility and cost for the to restructure utility billings meter reading schedules. And this is kind of a retelling, a reshowing of what we did last year. So a couple board meetings ago, the board requested that this information be brought back to show the feasibility and cost to restructure district's current utility billing and meter reading schedules. So the district currently performs meter reads and bills their customers bi-monthly. Our payments are due within 21 days of the bill date, and there is a 5 business day grace period before any penalties are assessed. We do have payment options available to customers if they are unable to make those payments by their due dates. So we do offer payment plans. We do offer customers to help them estimate their future billings during the different seasons. We also offer assistance in helping them do budget billing, plan out how much they can pay in the off months if they want to carry a credit forward to help them when their bills go up. We also have some low-income assistance through our sewer low-income program as well as through the federal low-income programs. So with our payment options, they are widely utilized by our customers. We have different options available. We're very flexible with our customers when they need a payment plan to help them get through anything that they have going on. We have very low delinquency rates. They're below 4%, actually below 2% as of last year. We have a very low write-off rate, and both of these rates are very well below our industry standards. So bi-monthly meter reading, currently our meter technicians spend over 555 hours performing the reads. We have over 48,000 reads that are done via cellular. It's called our AMI. We have radio read, vehicle read, and then we also have manually read meters. Our meter technicians spend an additional time of over 100 hours performing reread related activities. So after they read the meter, if there's a failure on it or if it looks like a bad read or high usage, so that we can inform the customers of what's going on out there. Yes, Lori?
How many meters do we read?
Reread?
How many meters are there that our meter readers read?
48,400.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to read, it went fast.
Sorry. So if we were to look at billing monthly, without converting our meters over to all radio or cellular read meters, we would need to essentially double our meter staff from 6 to 12. Our utility billing staff would need to see an increase from 7 to 10 so that they can handle the billing aspects as well as the customer inquiries and payments. Our current existing Hansen system would need to be restructured. we would need to update the tables and rates and quantities for our delinquencies as well as our penalty charges. That would be about a one-time cost of approximately $300,000 and an annual increase cost at last year's, remember, this is information from last year, about $1.5 million. So if we were to take on converting all the remainder of our meters, we still would need an increase to meter staff from 6 to 9 to assist with ongoing repairs and still performing rereads and assisting our customers. Utility billing staff would still need to increase the number from 7 to 10 in order to accommodate the billing monthly. We would still need to restructure our system that bills. And the number that we would, need to convert is about 18,000. I believe it's a little bit less than that because we were working on them this last year as well. So a one-time cost is over $13.5 million and an annual increase of 1.3. So after the last year when we gave the presentation to you all, we told you that we would continue with our public outreach and reach out more to our customers to let them know these options are available. So Jesse has done a great job of putting this information out into our waterfronts, out on our social media platforms. We share payment options, what our low-income options are, and just giving customers more information. So while it's an information item, we still have a staff recommendation that we, since we are able to maintain such low delinquency rates and we are continuing our customer outreach, we believe we should just stick with the bi-monthly billing and continue with no additional cost to that. So that's the end of the presentation. Yes, George?
Jenny, thank you for bringing this back. I have a definitive answer for people that ask why we don't bill on a monthly basis, and you lay out a cost of $1.5 million to do it on an annual basis. That's a pretty good answer. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I think, you know, this is a couple times we've had this come back, and it's really a very small problem. It's really a non-problem. I think if you look at the delinquency rates, the 2% and the write-off rate of 1%, that just tells me that the way we're doing it is working pretty well, and that people do have that option. If they have trouble budgeting their funds, they can go for the payment plan where they average over the year and you bill monthly, or they can pay monthly. So, you know, it's to me, it's really a non-problem.
Thanks, Jenny. I really appreciate this. And it may seem redundant for the staff to do these reports, but again, if these questions pop up, especially when we have new residents. And I am one of those who always paid monthly where I came from. And it's a good question. It is not a question to condescend to people, but it also is important that we are informed how much it's going to cost.
I'm sorry, this is an urgent matter, really was.
Okay. So that's okay, 2 interruptions now. So it really is something that people need to understand, and I appreciate the information. This includes the transparency we always ask for. And so, you know, to inform them and then tell them that for us to change, it's going to cost $15 million, really, not just 1.5, you know. There's definitely going to be a extreme amount of money included in that. And you're right, I agree with Director Dwyer about the low rates of, what do we call it?
Delinquency.
Thank you, delinquency rates. So I will talk, I've had enough for talking.
Really, that reflects
George, you had.
reflects very
you wanted to
well
go
on
ahead?
our customers.
Yes.
That they are managing their funds and paying their bills, the vast majority of them. So that's a positive for our community and the people we serve.
Just to reiterate, and I think a lot of these questions come from newbies in the neighborhood. And they move into Pollock Pines or Camino and say, well, my water bill was $240. I said, yeah, but that's for 2 months. And they say, well, yeah, but why don't you bill monthly? Because they get a normal PG&E or SPUD or whatever their bill on a monthly basis. So these numbers really help the board reaffirm why we do it. Okay?
Yeah, and, I mean, it's not so much a problem for us as it is a problem for some customers, as George and Lori both have pointed out, when people are new here, or they put in new landscaping or something like that, and they get that first summer bill, and, you know, $240, but in Cameron Park or El Dorado Hills, it could be $600, so it can be a
Yeah,
shock.
but you can afford it.
Well, there's a lot of retired folks that are barely hanging on in El Dorado Hills. Not everybody's affluent. A lot of people who moved there in the 70s and 80s that don't have a lot of money. So, and those are the folks that can be most affected because they're trying to age in place, and it's getting harder and harder to do. But I think what Jesse's doing and what we talked about last year, and again, if we continue to at least annually put the word out through all of our sources that there are options if you are having a little trouble, if you are shocked by that bill, you can spread it out, you can pay it monthly, you could do it over an annual budget. So I think it's good. So let's continue to promote that.
And I think that when folks call in, the customer service staff does a great job of walking them through every single option. It's just getting them to call in. But I think the delinquency rate speaks to the customer, but also the customer service staff that are able to help them figure out what's going to work best for them.
I agree. All right, is there any public comment on information item number 5?
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 5.
All right, thank you, Jenny. All right, we'll move to action item number 6.
Move one.
We have a motion.
I'll second it.
We have a second. These are general warrants. We're paying our bills. Is there any public comment on item 6?
Damn.
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 6. Option 1, moved by Director Osborne and second by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, thank you. And we will now move to item 7. Yeah.
Morning, Board. Pinch hitting for Greg this morning, Dan Corcoran, Operations Director. Okay, as the board beat me to the punch, we're here today to talk about the latest effort of our staff's planning to secure and maintain a fleet of vehicles and equipment for our customers. Next slide. We have a number of vehicles, as you saw in the agenda item, that are approaching the end of the service life and/or just having extensive downtime, which impacts our customer service. If you've attempted to buy a vehicle lately, you've probably seen, unfortunately, the price of vehicles are definitely outpacing inflation, and waiting is not a good strategy. Just in addition to just the price increases, just the production rate, as the assembly lines get retooled, there may be protracted periods of time before those vehicles that we need come back through production. So Greg's been working very carefully to try to hit these order banks as these vehicles that we need to replace our aging assets become available. In addition to the simple supply chain issues, the regulatory mandates and how that's also starting to bear down on our medium and large equipment, which I'll talk to a little bit more in a minute. Based upon these 3 factors, there's approximately 25 vehicles that we're asking the board to authorize procurement today. That doesn't mean that those vehicles will be rolling off the lots tomorrow. In some cases, be more than a year from now, and that's how far ahead that we need to plan. Next slide, please. On top of, is that?
Dan, I have a question about the
Yes, please.
production rates. Is that because the auto companies have to meet a efficiency standard, so they can't produce very many high gas consumption trucks and cars compared to the smaller, lighter? Is that the production? So they cap how many F-150s they can produce, and that's a low number, and how many Ford Focus they produce, and that's a higher number?
So there's actually, it's a great question. There's actually three main factors. Supply chain issues through third parties, when bringing in wholesale items. Economic drivers, of which certain cars sell better than others on markup, and then the regulatory framework of trying to meet the state, and in this case, federal mandates for emission standards. So all three of those factors are causing a wave in production, and then all of the consumers, like the district, are trying to navigate that and still maintain an adequate fleet. So thank you for that question. So our latest state banks, so on a periodic basis, the manufacturers will open up short banks. They used to be longer, but now they're very narrow windows that we have to try to hit, have our list ready, and go ahead and place those orders. So Greg did the most recent one with Ford, but what has happened now is the number of vehicles that you can order through these banks, through an apportionment process, has substantially reduced. So now we can only order 5 medium trucks, heavy-duty trucks without the standard cab in the back at one time. So that's a first that has hit us. In addition, there's only 25 total trucks that Ford will allow per order bank window. So that just shows that we have to plan ahead, because we can only replace our fleet a certain amount at a certain time. So what we've done as part of that strategy is actually look back to General Motors. We had been doing a lot of Fords exclusively, just based upon the replacement part availability, et cetera. But as you see our vehicles driving around in the district, you see some old Dodges still out there, a few. They're over 20 years old now, but they're still on the road. And we have quite a few GMs out there. And in fact, those international crew trucks that the board approved last year are actually GM powertrain with an international sticker on the front. So we're not, GM is familiar to the district. So, and then there's 4 trucks that we're still on the hunt for. We just have not been able yet to find anyone in this current order bank to identify specific vehicles with VINs yet. So we've given approximate values to those 4 vehicles and asking the board to authorize the general manager to procure those at the estimates that are listed in the agenda item. And as I mentioned, time is of the essence, and we have these trucks on hold, and that's why we're here today, to ask for your authority to go ahead and issue the PO. Next slide, please. So now we get to the regulatory question. So as you probably saw in the news, the larger vehicles, so 8,500 pounds and over. So, a standard truck with the utility bed, that's kind of where that threshold is, and everything above there. So right now, starting next year, 50% of those vehicles would require to be EV if that technology exists, and then bump to 100% by 2027. So our strategy is to look at what those vehicles are that are near the end of useful life now, knowing it could be a year or more before they actually take delivery, but it's from the purchase date. So when we would issue the PO, if the board approves the purchase today, we would go ahead and secure our spot to replace those with the traditional powered vehicles. There are some exemptions for small fleet vehicles or different thresholds that don't have a phasing in. And then obviously, there's some alternative regulatory strategies about zero emission vehicles. We're probably, from a practical sense, especially in our district at 220 square miles and 4,000 feet in elevation difference, the practicality is challenging, right? And so we're trying to, what is the most economical way to meet our customer service needs and reliability for our community? Next slide. So this is just an overview from the CARB regulations, just to kind of give a sense of where our vehicles are coming in. But basically, all these pictures in here are the types of vehicles that we're looking at. A lot of this is targeted towards the larger semi-trucks, et cetera, but nevertheless, a number of our vehicles do fall into this category of the 8,500 gross vehicle weight rating and above. Next slide. So here's the list of vehicles. And similar to what Greg has described to you before, we have a various accoutrement of challenges. Some vehicles are approaching a quarter century old, some obsolete retrofit diesel particulate filters, and then just the simple evaluation of the maintenance costs. Some of these vehicles are costing more to maintain than they are to keep on the road. It just makes sense. We do have a number of vehicles. You'll see some that have major idle times. For instance, those are the water construction crew trucks. Those vehicles, for the safety lights, for the hydraulic units, will need to obviously remain idling while they're doing the construction. So while 105,000 miles, so my vehicles have, actually all my vehicles have more than that. On a normal vehicle, that might not be a significant, but when you're towing around almost the maximum capacity of the vehicle every single day and it's idling for hours and hours, we're definitely seeing increased downtime of those vehicles, and that's why we're asking for those to be replaced. Next slide. So this is the first of 3 specific state contracts that we've identified. Downtown Ford, a number of vehicles here. Next slide. 5 vehicles, and those are the truck and chassis that we had mentioned. And then Watsonville Ford, the extended cab crew trucks. Next slide. The next slide is Winter Chevrolet. They're down in Elk Grove, the Elk Grove Auto Group. So whenever possible, obviously, we're trying to keep those at least within the Sacramento region, but from time to time, we've had to go to Southern California. That Greg is very, very persistent in trying to meet our needs through the state contract. And then these are the vehicles that we would propose to be acquired through the state contract under GM. And then the last slider, those 4 vehicles that we're still on the hunt for, these are our best estimates, given what will likely be a 2024 year class for the vehicle. And every year class that goes up, there's always a markup on the invoice. And so the sooner we can get our purchases in, the more economical these can be. Next slide. So option 1 is to award contracts to Downtown Ford in the not to exceed amount of $802,000, Watsonville Fleet Group in the not to exceed amount of $189,398, and Winter Chevrolet in the not to exceed amount of $1,360,000 for the purchase of 21 replacement trucks, and authorize the general manager to approve contracts for the purchase of 4 additional replacement vehicles in the not to exceed amount of $170,000 for a total funding request of $2,521,398 for the 2024 vehicle replacement program, project number 24003. Okay, and it's staff recommends option 1.
Move 1, and I have a commentary.
Go.
I'll second it, and I also have a comment.
Okay, George, go ahead.
Well, I'm concerned that in our environment, electric vehicles are not going to be applicable. We operate on a tremendous variety of different kinds of environments that may or may not be conducive to having a charge station really close. I go back to my old life as a firefighter. You can't expect, we run sometimes 48, 72 hours straight without a relief. You can't just run off to a charge thing. And I just, as a final commentary, there was a cartoon with a tank, it said mean and green, and a guy steps out and he says, do you have a charge cord? Now, I mean, there's some of these things that the legislature passes that are predominantly urban people, and they don't have the reality check that we would have is in a rural environment. So I agree we need to replace the vehicles, but I just don't think that the electric vehicle per se for the vast majority of our equipment is appropriate.
Well, one, I don't think we're buying an electric vehicle in this bunch, right? So
That's
it's not a problem. And, you know, opinions on the other side is eventually, 10 years from now, these vehicles, or 15 years, are going to be old, you know, just as much. Gas might be available, there might be other fuel necessity, but I think it's important people understand that we need to keep up with the times. And when you put things in a certain category, that's not always true. Hybrids are working in rural areas. So, you know, I have this kind of thing that goes up and down this, you climb up the mountain on a hybrid, and then when you go down, you recreate your electricity. So I know a lot of people who use them on Highway 50 all the time. And, you know, as for vehicles that our staff is going to be in, we want to make sure they're safe, they're clean, and they come off the roads in snow, and if these older vehicles are a hazard. I think I have one other question to ask you. What happens to the old vehicles when we surplus them?
Thank you. The declaration of surplus, they are auctioned.
You auction them off at a
And then the
state auction thing, or?
I believe it's a local auction vendor, bar none, I believe is
Okay.
the vendor that we use. I'm not 100% sure. Looking to Jim.
Okay, those are the.
However, given the regulations, you can buy like gasoline or diesel
Credits.
vehicles if you're replacing vehicles. So we may be storing some of these vehicles for future replacement,
Just in case, yeah,
just in case.
all right.
Thanks. My other comment is, have we looked at, because in small two-stroke engines, chainsaws, portable generators, so on, those regulations are slamming hard on January 1st. Are we looking at some of that equipment to make sure that we have enough to carry us over? Because the electric is not there yet on a lot of this. It is for some, but not for others.
No, great question, Director Day. So Director Day is referring to the internal combustion engine regulation for generators, small equipment. We're also following that as well. There are a series of, so we have the large equipment. We're not even talking about the traditional vehicles yet, which we anticipate will be forthcoming, and then the internal combustion, the small. So we're also looking at that and what's our strategies to keep our equipment going in those circumstances as
Yeah,
well.
and again, the goal is laudable. We all want cleaner air, but sometimes the practical application sometimes isn't always there, so. All right, is there, we have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on this item?
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 7, option 1, moved by Director Osborne and seconded by Director Anzini. I believe we're ready for the vote.
All right, please vote.
Division 1 and 2, 4 and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, thank you. And now we'll move to our last item, item number 8.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, Tracy Crane, wastewater operations manager, here to talk about a ratification of an emergency contract that we had to repair the Marina Village #1 force main. So Marina Village force main, it had a failure on Friday afternoon, September 8th. That one was the third failure in the last 7 years of the pipeline. It also had an additional failure on September 17th, which was about 150 feet east or upstream of the earlier repair, making it 4, 3 of which occurred in the last 6 weeks. We are in the middle of a comprehensive analysis of all the pump station data and the pipeline. In fact, tomorrow we have a meeting with the hydraulic modelers and getting someone to look at the sections of pipeline that we cut out to see if we can determine what the failure mode is. One of the issues is 2 of the failures have been on the ductile iron sections and 2 of them have been on PVC sections, so we're not seeing the same type of failure in each one of the failures. This pipeline begins at Marina Village lift station in El Dorado Hills, which is right down next to Browns Ravine. It's about 9,800 feet of 12-inch force main, consists of PVC and ductile iron, conveys it over a 200 or so foot elevation change, so the pipeline runs at about 120 PSI. And it's also takes in flow from the surrounding area. So actually, there's 9 lift stations around the Folsom Lake area there, plus the localized flow that comes into this station, and it's the point that gets it out to, pumps it over to St. Andrews and then on to El Dorado Hills treatment plant. It conducts significant flow at times. It can pump up to 500,000, somewhere between 500,000, and 2 million gallons a day. The thing to remember about the flow is it's not constant. So that's about 350 gallons a minute up to about 1,250 gallons a minute. But it's not a steady flow because folks get up in the morning, the flows come up, they go home, they go down, they get home at night, they come back up, and then they drop off at night. So at times, we have to deal with significant flow, and then at other times, there's less flow. So district staff immediately were working on containing the flow, containing the spill, and cleanup efforts. And so Doug Veerkamp General Engineering was contracted to dig up the pipeline and do the repair. So this is sort of the map. You can see Marina Village. If could have zoomed out a little bit more, you could see Folsom Lake would have been in the upper left-hand corner there. The location of the first of the 3, the August repair point was right, and that's a private driveway sort of that goes into the lift station. Unfortunately, the one we're talking about was in the middle of Green Valley Road, so significant traffic issues as well. And that's just a little map of all the other lift stations there that pump into Marina Village 1. So as I said, district crews were contracted to try to deal with the flows and clean up there's a small drainage creek that the guys are standing over right there that runs right next to the site, and about 3,200 gallons of the initial spill made it into the drainage creek. So cleanup efforts included sandbagging that creek, and we had to remove over 87,000 gallons, pump it till it's dry to make sure that none of that flow made it to Folsom Lake. And, you know, we're confident that 100% of the spill that entered the waterway was recovered.
Tracy, do we have to worry about soil at all?
No, I think the soil's good.
Okay.
So here's the beginning of the leak there. You can see significant traffic control right in the eastbound lanes of Green Valley Road, and the picture there, we're just getting ready to excavate. Next slide. It was a challenge to find it. One, because of the thickness of the pavement there, and you can see a chunk that was removed. Yeah, I was on vacation, so fortunately for me, but unfortunately for Mr. Corcoran, you can see the guy there holding the shovel, giving you the thing there is Mr. Corcoran. But it took us a bit to get through.
No shovel fit in his hand.
It took us a bit to get through the pavement. You can see some significant hunks of pavement there. And then the next slide. Also, there was another abandoned PVC line that sat right over the top of this pipe. So that also complicated efforts because they dug down, found pipe, thought they were on the leak. Turns out that it was an abandoned pipe. So it took us a bit longer to find it, isolate it, and get it repaired. And the whole time we're having to control flow at the lift station using our pump trucks and even external resources to come out and help us.
So a question, how does an abandoned pipe, where does that come from?
You know, I'm not sure. We're looking at all the records. I'm not really sure. Our record isn't great for how it ended up. First of
Yeah.
all, our maps show it off the side of the right-of-way there. And so no one was expecting it to be in the middle of the road. But these things were put in 20, 30 years ago, and if they didn't get good as-built and get them into the record, sometimes you find surprises like this.
Tracy, got a question?
Yes.
So, you know, when we contracted with as many pumping contractors as we could find and called in the mutual aid from, was it Folsom?
City of Folsom.
Those were being pumped out of the lift station holding, what do we call it? The
Wet
hold-
well.
Thank you,
Wet
wet well. So that wasn't affluent that was overflowing and going anyplace. They were trying to keep up with the demand as people. And so we basically had stopped the leak, sandbagged to capture whatever was leaking out. and then we're pumping out of the wet well to make sure it didn't, that we could keep up with customer demand, so to speak. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Director
Great,
Dwyer.
thanks.
That is- When we get there, we shut the pumps off, so that essentially stops the leak. However, that you have to drain that pipe, the water that's in the pipeline, so.
Because it's stuck up there where everybody's using the pipe.
Yeah, and so all of the hauling of the effluent, or of the wastewater occurred coming out of the wet well at Marina Village 1, and that's going on trucks. And then we have other crews that are working on capturing what's spilled and sandbagging the creek and getting the water out of the creek. Slide. So in this particular one, we found about a half-inch hole in the bottom of the pipe, of the ductile iron pipe. Possibly from being bedded on a rock over the years and just finally worked its way through it. But again, we're going to do yeah, exactly.
Are there any small fault lines anywhere around that area? Because it seems like if it's breaking at one end, it's shaking at another.
No active fault lines that we know of. That's part of our analysis. One thing
Right.
that we've done immediately was pull all of the pressure. So this pipeline rests at about 80 PSI when the pumps are off and runs up to around 120 to 130 PSI when it's running. We've pulled all the pressure records over the last 3 months and looked at it and can't find any spikes or anomalies that way.
Okay.
We have the section of pipe that was cut out in the subsequent leak. This one, obviously, we put a repair band on, and we're having that analyzed as well. And we have our hydraulic modelers and engineering, and we're all meeting tomorrow on site to just try to walk through it and see if we can come up with the failure mode. So site cleanup, as I mentioned, we had to clean the whole site up. That includes washing things down. We have some disinfectant spray that we could spray. We collect all that and bring it to the treatment plant. And as I mentioned earlier, we collected about 87,000 gallons to make sure that everything was cleaned. It was a significant effort to do it. Total estimated expenditures for Doug Veerkamp was $135,000. APS Environmental, $21,000. AC Septic, just a local hauler at $7,750. Sierra Site Services, another local septic hauler at $8,700. City of Folsom provided a truck with mutual aid. And then the in-house labor and equipment costs totaled about $42,000, bringing the estimated total for this leak at about $215,855.
What were the dates of the road work again?
The road work, so this particular one we're talking about occurred on September 8th, Friday the 8th, and they got it restored Sunday. It was all the way till Sunday that they were actively working on the site.
So the 10th or 9th or whatever it was, okay.
Yeah, so it went Friday to Sunday.
Okay, well, that's good. Just there was buzz, a lot of buzz on next door this weekend about gravel on Green Valley in that
Oh, well,
area.
so what happens, and I know this because of the subsequent failure that happened, which we were able to find quickly, and it was a much smaller, we got the repair done much faster, was that we had to hurry up and get it paved because the county was gonna chip seal that road. So
Right.
they're actively doing,
Right.
we didn't put the
Everywhere.
striping back on the lanes because the county was gonna come in and do chip sealing this weekend.
Well,
So
they're chipping a lot because there's a lot of people pissed off. But I don't know about the ceiling part.
Yeah.
But good, it wasn't us then.
That wasn't us,
Good.
that's the county. doing chip sealing.
Good. George?
Is this on our capital improvement replacement? It's not, okay.
It
Emergency.
is not.
If we, not, exactly, not yet, you know? Okay, thank you.
Next slide. So the board options is to ratify the general manager's award of a construction contract to Doug Veerkamp General Engineering in the not-to-exceed amount of $135,000 for the emergency repair of Marina Village Force Main number 1. Obviously, other options or take no action, and our recommendation is option 1.
Do I have a motion?
I'll move option 1.
I'll second it.
All right, a motion and a second. Any further board question or comment? Any public comment?
Vice President Day, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 8. Option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Osborne. I believe we're ready for the vote at this time.
Please vote.
Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you, Tracy. All right, and that ends our agenda items, review of assignments.
We just have the one direction to staff from Director Day regarding that the board is afforded the opportunity to see the draft Prop 218, which I believe was already planned,
Good, thank you.
but it was a reminder.
All right, meeting is adjourned at 9:57 a.m.